Good afternoon, and welcome back to Encyclopedia.zone. My name is Don Jolly, freelance writer whose work has appeared in the Los Angeles Review of Books, Penthouse Magazine, former editor of Dagger Magazine, among others. And today we are going to be covering the last little bit of Comic-Con news. You'll see that in the previous video I covered the extremely important and life-shattering story that Thor is going to be a woman in a movie. Big news, whoa, amazing, amazing stuff. But today we actually get to talk about something that I think is a little bit more substantial. And that is that they're doing a mini series based on Watchmen. I'm looking at the initial reactions to the trailer that they released at Comic-Con. People are saying it's bad. I have a hot take in the YouTube parlance because I kind of liked the Watchmen trailer. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. First off, Watchmen, obviously hugely influential graphic novel by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. Great piece of comic book art. Everybody loves it. Everybody already knows about it. Everybody knows why it's so fucking good. They even made it into a slightly boulderized, like, shitty Zack Snyder movie that, does have some effective sequences. I like the part where Dr. Manhattan's on Mars and it's played with Philip Glass. That's pretty good. So we all know Watchmen. And Watchmen is a little bit of a raw nerve when it comes to comics because it is the most successful mainstream superhero thing that's taken seriously as a work of literature. It's been in continuous publication since its original publication in the 1980s, and it is controversial because the original creator of Watchmen and the writer responsible for a lot of what makes the book excellent. Dave Gibbons did a great job on the art, but like the writing of Watchmen is what brings people in. Alan Moore feels that he was cheated out of the ownership of the Watchmen characters, which are a very distinctive riff on the Charlton Comics characters of the late 1960s, the Question, Peacemaker, etc. And basically, he cut a deal with DC Comics that the rights for these characters, his versions, Rorschach, the comedian, etc., would revert to him once the book was out of print. It was, sort of inconceivable at the time that the book would remain in continuous print for 30 years, but, more than 30 years. But that's exactly what has happened. And in the last decade, maybe even a little bit before that, because I can't remember when before Watchmen is, DC has been taking Moore's characters and featuring them in spin-off material. Moore did not participate in the movie that they made, the Zack Snyder film. Moore did not participate in the spin-off comics that were released around the same time. He certainly didn't participate in the miniseries Doomsday Clock, which, as far as I know, is still running and features Dr. Manhattan shooting space beams at Green Lantern on Mars. And there's Bad Blood. So let's cut out there's basically two parts to Watchmen. There's the ethics of doing anything with the Watchmen characters, and then there's actually what Watchmen is, which is a alternate reality superhero story that basically uses this one central metaphor to power its narrative, and that's that superheroes are representative in some way of American character and American power. Alan Moore, of course, is a British writer. All the superheroes in Watchmen are American, and all of those heroes, especially the comedian and Dr. Manhattan, are, I think, explicitly meant to represent something uniquely American. Some element of the American character, American naivete, American superpower dominance of the world in the case of Dr. Manhattan. The serene American desire for power and control that you see in Ozymandias. Like it's a commentary, and it's a political book in some ways, and it's a book about superhero history. Like Watchmen was published in the 1980s when superheroes were primarily of interest to very detail-oriented, obsessive baby boomers. And Watchmen is a story in the same way that Thor: Love and Thunder is a story about of the travails of a brand in a much more legitimate way. Watchmen is about the history of superheroes in American culture and combining their publication history and their sort of the ideology of the creators behind them, combining that with a larger commentary on America's role in the world as a whole. And so this is why you have like the this moral conscience of the characters being the Steve Ditko crazy breakaway Rorschach, because Moore does have a lot of respect for Steve Ditko's unflexible ethicality. He is very open about it. Like, as much as he thinks that Ditko's right wing positions are abhorrent and scary, he has a lot of respect for the fact that he took the morality of the stories he was telling seriously, and that he believed in an absolute morality, which is something that I think Moore has carried on into his engagements with the publishing industry, who's responsible for distributing his work. So basically, not to go into a whole thing about Watchmen, but basically you've got these two elements. You've got a commentary on the history of superheroes, the publication history and the cultural history and the ideological history, combined with a commentary on the nature of American power and culture and society in the 20th century. And there's even a part in Watchmen in one of the text sections at the end of the issues where they talk about Dr. Manhattan, superpowers and superpowers. This is about America's status as a superpower, like moral, technological. I would even say like spiritual in some of the Dr. Manhattan parts. It's a really well done book that uses the comic book format to its unique benefit and is constantly using visual and text juxtaposition and symmetry to produce a very rich, layered story that's also extremely accessible. It's accessible in the way that comic books are. Like, you could be a 12-year-old and read what is basically, a pretty dense postmodern novel with the recurring images and situations and stuff, and it's completely comprehensible to you because Watchmen is done in the comic book format. It's a really, really good book. The premise of Watchmen is superheroes are real, and they have had, an effect, a major effect in the case of Dr. Manhattan, on the course of American life and society. But at the beginning of the book, superheroes are banned. They're in a very culturally derided place, and they're coming back. It's the story about superheroes having been outlawed, and basically they have one big last adventure that culminates in a catastrophic saving of the world. So what's happened to superheroes culturally, ideologically, in terms of creators since Watchmen? Watchmen published in 1986, year I was born, actually. Superheroes have achieved a position of cultural and economic prominence that is so huge that basically the fantasy premise of Alan Moore's book in the 80s is now literally true. Like, superheroes, in some vast psychological way, do represent American cultural hegemony and power. And these films about superheroes are some of the most successful in the history of the world. They're dominant global cultural forces. And people spend the equivalent of the GDP of a small nation making these films. They shoot them all over the world. They almost seem like a military enterprise. The Marvel movies are a 20-film cycle about the redemption of an American arms dealer. Like, the symbolism is not disguised here. Superheroes have become, the Alan Moore's metaphor is now literal truth. So this is where we get the Comic-Con trailer for the new Watchmen miniseries. First of all, it doesn't look like it's actually about any of the characters from the old story, except for Laurie, who's back, and she's old and an FBI agent. The premise is that rather than having superheroes be banned and be untouchable culturally and sort of be reviving, superheroes, since Ozymandias's plan was actuated in the 80s, have become such a prominent, visible part of American culture that they're basically like religions. Like, vigilantism is now super, super, super common. all the cops wear masks. And you know, it's an HBO miniseries based on Watchmen. I'm just asking you to put the ethical concerns of that aside for a minute. That's not a terrible premise for doing a sequel to Watchmen. Like, it's a little bit of a reversal. You could do some interesting things with that. I kind of want to see how the world works where everybody is wearing masks practically. Um, you know, on just a pure story level, it's not a terrible idea for a follow up. They've got me on the premise. Like, you know, good for them. I don't think it looks terrible. But then we get to the second part, which is, isn't it bad that any of this is happening at all, considering that the writer who came up with, who made this piece of work so valuable, does not approve of these adaptations and alterations? And isn't it just kind of a fucking whorehouse thing where, like, you're taking these great works of art and turning them into something that is, you know, just endlessly repeatable. It's no longer an independent work of art. It's now just a franchise. That's all true, and it's gross. But Watchmen, like, the trigger has already been pulled on that shit with Watchmen years ago. They made the movie, which allowed them to start making merchandise. Now you see people with Dr. Manhattan action figures. They made the Before Watchmen miniseries, which was a series of pointless, pretentious cash grabs and tie-ins that were focused on the Watchmen characters. And then they did this Doomsday Clock. Like, I like to imagine, and I did this in a previous video, but I'm going to do it now. I like to imagine Alan Moore with all his, like, stern, ethical writer energy, sitting down with Bob DC, the editor, the representative of fucking DC Comics fucking mindset, profit-based mindset, you know, like a manager kind of guy, big, swarthy, smoking a cigar. And Alan Moore, you know, he thinks that Dr. Manhattan is this beautiful image for American superpower in the 20th century, and the danger of the remoteness of American scientific and military thinking from any kind of human reality. Bob DC has a different opinion. Oh, yeah. Oh, what'd you make there? Oh, you made a metaphor? Oh, you made a metaphor. No, 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 no. Let me tell you what you made. You made Superman. But we already own Superman, so it belongs to us. The only difference between what you did and what the guys who made, like, Captain Marvel did, because they made, like, Superman, they put a lightning bolt on his chest. Let me tell you what you did. You made Superman, except his costume is a little blue penis. He's naked. He's got a little blue penis. That's what you made. You made Superman with the penis. That's what you made, Alan Moore. And they're going to make money off Superman with the penis for as long as they possibly can. And it's just going to keep happening. I mean, I look, am I going to watch the new Watchmen show? For the purposes of making YouTube videos about it, probably. But I'm not going to give HBO a goddamn red cent. And I do feel bad about giving them even the time. But when you make corporate comics, nothing you do is sacred. If you make something that belongs to a bigger institution, it's not yours. And I understand that in the 80s, you know, like, could he have done Watchmen creator owned? I mean, Brat Pack is maybe a little bit like that. But who's heard of Brat Pack versus who's heard of Watchmen? You get a lot when you work with those big piratical publishers in terms of outreach, in terms of audience, and in terms of promotion. And it's not so much like, you know, Moore took a Faustian bargain and, you know, we shouldn't, you know, we should blame him for that. It's just, it's the nature of the fucking beast here. When you work with these big companies, they will fuck you. You know, they don't have an idea of artistic sacredness. You know, they create properties to be exploited. And, like, if Rorschach was slightly less insane and like, if Rorschach fucking showered regularly, they'd put him on kids' backpacks. You know, I mean, look, basically what I'm saying is the level of sacredness that you're able to achieve in corporate superhero comics is pretty low. And Watchmen has been treated with, at least until very recently, more respect than most. Uh, of the things that they've done to it since its initial publication, like compared to what they've done in the comic books, where like literally Dr. Manhattan is fighting Superman on Mars, like this miniseries does not look that bad. And it's got a pretty decent premise, you know? We do live in a world that's dominated by superhero imagery and superhero themes. So maybe they'll have something smart to say about it. I don't have a huge amount of confidence in the writing team, but like I don't know. It's a it's a pretty decent premise. And I think it's actually kind of true. So I feel like we live in the Watchmen timeline. And I'll tell you what really made me feel this way is looking at the trailer for Jay and Silent Bob reboot. And it's like it's Kevin Smith and it's Jay and they're fucking old and they're still doing it. And I was like, this is the kind of thing. This is like when you are reading Watchmen and you see a newspaper headline in the background of a panel about how Richard Nixon won a fifth term. Like, this is one of those little alternate reality differences. Like, I feel like we somehow ended up in this perverse timeline where adolescent fantasies from the mid 1960s have become our governing myths because that's what happened. I feel like we're living in the fucking Watchmen alternate universe. And somewhere there's a universe where comic book stores are doing really well and a bunch of fucking geeky guys are just getting together and comparing like their favorite Green Lantern stories in secret, like a cabal. That's the Prime universe. Somehow we ended up in the universe where like fucking Iron Man is the biggest property, the biggest like cultural idea that exists. Fucking Iron Man. Like I don't know. Something's gone screwy. But I don't know. It's Comic Con. What do you want? It's Comic Con.